Dr. Katherine Clift is Executive Director at Agriculture Victoria. She received her veterinary degree from Murdoch University and her master's in veterinary public health management from the University of Sydney. Katherine has worked in government for nearly 20 years, both here in Australia and New Zealand, spanning across biosecurity, regulation, and market access. Welcome, Katherine.
Thank you very much, Ram. It's fantastic to be here today and have the opportunity to talk about traceability from a Victorian perspective. And thanks to Malcolm, I think our presentations will be very complementary to each other. So I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. So I'd like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and all of the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting today. So I'm well aware that you're probably all reasonably familiar with traceability, but I just thought I'd start with a bit of an introduction. So traceability systems essentially can track the journey of food from farm to fork through all of the supply chain measures. And from my perspective, there's many different drivers around traceability from the regulatory end. So that might be around biosecurity, food safety, meeting export government requirements, through to things that are more in the value add around product quality, supply chain efficiencies, additional assurances that can be provided. And then in terms of the Victorian government aims, we look to influence the national agenda in this area, build awareness, support implementation of traceability, and then really become a global leader in this area and support our producers and our industry to do so. So I thought I'd talk about some of the challenges as well as some of the opportunities in this space. So from our perspective, our current traceability systems are largely meeting the baseline requirements, but we do trail some of the market leaders. And although we are leading competitors in livestock traceability, it certainly doesn't go all the way through the full supply chain into our international markets. And other countries are investing in traceability, and they're moving much more quickly than we are in some areas, particularly horticulture, which Malcolm mentioned with plant traceability, grain, wool sectors are some of the areas where traceability still is either very variable or certainly not as mature as it could be. And our horticulture traceability systems are currently quite unharmonised across industries and supply chains, fragmented and not fully digitised. So that's a risk to us when we look at the export profiles and the sort of values that we might want to achieve, but also from a biosecurity perspective, from a food safety perspective, and being able to manage some of the risks, that's also really important to us. So we have in Victoria some really clear aims in this area, and it's around becoming a global leader in traceability and export growth through raising awareness. And some of you may be aware that we recently launched a traceability hub, which is available on our Agriculture Victoria website. And this aims to give people information and some tools to become more informed and aware of options around traceability for their industry, organisation or their business, noting that there's a really big variability across industry in terms of how much understanding, knowledge and awareness people have at the moment. We also support research and a number of pilots. I'll talk to one of those later. We're also investing in collaboration. So obviously GS1 is one of the really important partners that we've been working with, and enhancing government frameworks. So obviously for us in Agriculture Victoria, we work very closely in the national frameworks to be able to support a national approach to addressing some of these challenges and opportunities. And then obviously enabling innovation across the industries and sectors in this space. So I won't be able to run through all of the detail that's on this slide, but I thought it just gives you a little flavour of the many different areas of work that we have underway. So we've been very fortunate in Victoria, and the Victorian government has made a significant investment in traceability. So we have both the Traceability Fund and the Food to Market Grant Fund. And these are some of the activities that have occurred under there. So as I already mentioned, the Traceability Information Hub. We also have smart traceability design and innovation, where we've been able to work with a number of industry sectors to really look at what are the opportunities in this space, how can we support innovation, building Victorian traceability systems. So that's had a focus on trialling some new approaches, particularly in livestock, cherries, and we're also working on a portal that will provide an easier entry point into Agriculture Victoria for our industries. Marketing also, so how can we really leverage all of the good work that we do in traceability and make sure there's better visibility of it in overseas markets, supporting the development of Australian and Victorian traceability standards. And then we've had a range of different pilots and projects in the citrus industry, table grapes. And so all of this work is really helping and supporting everything that we do in traceability. And because obviously I thought it would be of interest, I've just put a little indicator there to show where we're using GS1 to support these initiatives. And you can see, because of the reach that GS1 has and the way that it's very interoperable and integrated into supply chains, it's been quite crucial to a number of these areas of work. So horse traceability, this is an area of work that's been really important to Victoria, but also nationally. Horses are obviously a really important part of lifestyle in Australia, and also competition and the racing industry. And so Victoria hosted the National Horse Traceability Working Group, which was tasked with looking at how we could improve traceability for horses in Australia. And that had contribution from all the states and territories and the relevant industry sectors. And this was really driven largely out of concerns for biosecurity. So some of you may remember back in 2009, we had a large outbreak of equine influenza, which had a very significant economic impact. And so having a better traceability system for horses would certainly help to manage the impacts of another disease of horses, but also there's related benefits around animal welfare, for example, and some other aspects to how horses are used. So recently in October, that report was endorsed by agriculture ministers, and there's currently an advisory committee that's looking at how this approach will actually be able to be implemented and funded. So that's a really exciting area for us, and obviously in Victoria we'll be continuing to work with our Office of Racing in Victoria, but also the other states and territories as we look to progress the next steps around horse traceability. One of the particular areas of focus for this discussion was around obviously traceability's role in biosecurity. So I thought it was worthwhile just touching obviously on the emergency animal disease aspects of this. And many of you would be aware there's been a heightened concern around this because of the situation with lumpy skin disease and foot and mouth disease in Indonesia. So every year we undertake disease investigations, and this just gives you an indication on how many of these we dealt with over the past 12 months or so. So over 400 disease investigations, and then a further nearly 700 significant disease investigations. So those are the ones that are undertaken by private veterinarians with support of the department. So these activities are occurring every single day. And out of those, quite frequently, every few weeks, we may have one of those where we are genuinely more concerned that there may be an exotic disease, and we have to go to the extent of then ruling out that there's any concerns there. And just to show the sort of impacts and consequences that can arise around the movement of animals in Australia. So this is looking at just 1 month. So it was November last year. So there were more than 500,000 movements of livestock into and within Victoria, and that included movements from across all states and territories, but most of those movements were from New South Wales and South Australia, and you can see that, you know, there's a significant number of Victorian abattoirs that received livestock, and that's because Victoria is really very significant in the livestock processing. We tend to receive livestock from all down the eastern seaboard for processing in the meat industry. So that means that we are sort of uniquely at risk when it comes to something like a foot and mouth disease outbreak. And any one of these movements could have been an animal that was infected. When you think about a foot and mouth disease scenario, foot and mouth disease has quite a reasonable incubation period. It can be up to 14 days, and animals may not necessarily be showing clinical signs. So by the time the disease is detected, they could have moved hundreds, if not thousands of kilometres. They could have moved through a sale yard and onto a number of properties. So you can see, therefore, how critical it is when we talk about things like having a national livestock standstill in the event that we have something like foot and mouth disease detected in Australia, because we really need to stop all of these movements to be able to get a handle on the disease situation. So in terms of looking at that in a little bit more detail, and some of you may be aware of some of the facts and figures on this slide, but essentially there's been some good work done that's looked at the probability of a major emergency animal disease over the next 5 years, and collectively it's come out at more than 50%. So that's why we in government, but also across the industry sectors, are concerned, and we're doing an awful lot of work to enhance our level of preparedness. But in terms of traceability, the reason this is so important is because, as I mentioned, we'd want to implement a national livestock standstill. We would need to trace all of the livestock, the products, the equipment, and be able to implement really effective quarantine and movement controls to be able to manage any disease spread and enable us to undertake the required control activities. So this is why it really matters having such good traceability, because the traceability allows you to significantly improve the speed of your response. And we know from the foot and mouth disease responses that have occurred internationally that the faster you're able to respond, the more you're able to retain your credibility and your reputation, and then the quicker you're able to re-establish your trade, which is the ultimate game really here, that you want to re-establish your trade and be able to export again as soon as possible after you've controlled the disease event. So turning more to our plant sector, this is a look at one of our table grapes, one of our pilots that we undertook in the table grapes sector. So we partnered with the Australian Table Grapes Association to look at how they could diversify and protect their exports by developing producer to consumer traceability. So we used individual QR codes, and these were added to product that was exported to 14 different countries. And everyone in the supply chain, from the farmer through to the consumer, was able to engage with the brand through using a smartphone scan. And we used the GS1 standards to be able to harmonise the data across the supply chain. So this really showed how the businesses could future-proof themselves for the evolving traceability requirements in these export markets, but also really demonstrated the additional value add in terms of being able to engage directly with consumers in overseas export markets and also with their supply chain partners. And it provides a really good template for implementation across other horticulture sectors as well. So what's next for traceability in Victoria? Well, it is a really exciting area, and it's one that I really enjoy working in. But essentially, we're looking to be a global leader in traceability to ensure that our domestic and international market access is maintained and further enhanced, that we are able to support our industry and our organisations in terms of growing consumer demand for the premium products that we produce, and that they're able to meet the increasing integrity standards, that we're able to manage emergencies, biosecurity risks, food recalls and other adverse events, and be able to support sustainable growth through innovation in products, farming systems and value chains, and that the data that's generated through traceability is able to be captured, analysed and used to support continuous improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I think that's a great overview of number of different things happening in the state of Victoria. Really pleased to know a few things have actually progressed, and especially the content around the progress on the WWFs is really one of the success stories, I believe, coming out of 2022. So I really appreciate you sharing that, and then most importantly, the role of traceability in the leading efforts of biosecurity. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much.